last place we should have gone. I believed in Bigfoot my whole life. Not in some casual way where you think it might be cool if it existed. I mean, really believed. The kind of belief that makes people at parties slowly back away from you when the subject comes up. My grandfather told me stories when I was 6 years old. He'd been a logger in Northern California in the 50s, and one morning his entire crew heard something screaming in the forest that made every single man go quiet. He said it wasn't a mountain lion, wasn't a bear, it was something that made the hair on his neck stand up. He died when I was 12, but I never forgot the way his hands shook when he told that story. So yeah, I've been obsessed for 23 years now. I've read every book, watched every documentary, studied every piece of footage. I've spent my savings on camping gear and trail cameras. And until last October, I'd found absolutely nothing. But last October changed everything. There were 5 of us on that expedition. We'd met online in a forum dedicated to cryptid research, and after months of planning, we decided to pool our resources and do this thing right. One guy brought the camping gear and knew the area. Another had experience with trail cameras and surveillance equipment. The third person was our cave drone expert. She'd been exploring abandoned mines for years and had top-of-the-line equipment. The fourth handled navigation and mapping. And me? I was the one who found the location. I'd spent months going through old sighting reports online, marking locations on maps, trying to find connections that others might have missed. Most people focus on hotspots where sightings happen frequently, but I started looking at the gaps instead. There was this one area in the Pacific Northwest that had almost no reports, a 20-mile radius that should have been prime territory. Dense forest, water sources, steep terrain, perfect for something that wanted to stay hidden. But nothing. No sightings in that zone going back 40 years. At first I thought maybe people just didn't go there. But when I checked hiking forums and hunting groups, I found plenty of people who'd been through the area. They posted pictures, talked about the trails, shared camping spots, so people definitely went there. They just never reported seeing anything unusual. That's when it hit me. What if the absence of reports wasn't because nothing was there? What if it was because something was there, and it was so good at staying hidden that people passed right by without noticing? I posted my theory in the forum, and that's when the others reached out. They'd been thinking the same thing. Within a week, we had a plan. Within a month, we had the equipment. By September, we were ready to go. We decided on early October when the weather would still be manageable, but the crowds would be gone. Our base camp would be a mile from an old mining site I'd found on historical maps, a cinnabar operation from the 1870s that had been abandoned for over a century. The mine sat in a valley between 2 ridges, surrounded by dense pine forest. If I were a large primate trying to stay hidden in the modern world, I'd use every advantage the terrain offered. Caves, overhangs, and definitely abandoned mines with networks of tunnels where no human had set foot in decades. We drove up in 2 vehicles, parked at a trailhead, and hiked 6 miles to reach our campsite. It was a small clearing beside a creek tucked into the trees with decent visibility. We set up 3 tents, organized our gear, and used the last few hours of daylight to scout the immediate area. The forest felt wrong from the start. I've done enough camping to know what the woods should sound like. Birds, squirrels rustling in the underbrush, the occasional crack of a branch as deer move through. But here, there was nothing. Just wind through the pines and water running over rocks. I mentioned it to the others that night around our small campfire. They'd noticed it too. One person said maybe we'd just picked a quiet spot. Another said the silence probably meant we'd found exactly what we were looking for, a place where something had established territory and other animals knew to stay away. That first night, I barely slept. Every sound seemed amplified. Around 3 a.m, I heard something heavy moving through the brush, maybe 100 yards from camp. Deliberate footsteps, not the casual wandering of a deer. I lay in my tent with my flashlight in hand, listening. The footsteps circled partway around our camp, then stopped. After about 10 minutes of silence, they moved away. In the morning, I told the others. 2 of them had heard it too. We searched the area where I thought the sounds came from, but found nothing. No tracks, no disturbed vegetation, nothing. The ground was too hard and covered in pine needles to hold prints anyway. We spent that second day setting up trail cameras around the perimeter of camp and along game trails. We placed them high and angled them to capture anything moving through the area. Then 3 of us hiked toward the old mine site to scout it out before bringing the drone. The mine was about 2 miles from camp, up a steep ridge covered in loose rocks and thick brush. We found it around noon, a dark opening in the hillside, partially collapsed but still accessible. The cinnabar rock was obvious once you knew what to look for. The entrance area had a reddish tint, and chunks of the ore were scattered around where it had been dug out and discarded. None of us went inside. Even from 20 feet away, we could see the opening was unstable. Rotten timbers jutted from the entrance, and rocks had fallen from the ceiling. The place looked like it could come down at any moment, but standing there, I got that feeling. You know the one, when you're certain someone is watching you, but you can't see them. The hair on my arms stood up. I looked at the others and could tell they felt it too. We took photos, marked the location on our GPS, and headed back to camp. That night we discussed our plan. Our drone expert said she could send her equipment into the mine the next day. It was equipped with lights, a 4K camera, and enough battery to explore for about 40 minutes. The drone was expensive, professional cave exploration equipment, not some toy. She'd used it dozens of times in old mines and had never lost one. We agreed to start at first light. Get in, get the footage, and see what was actually inside that mine before we made any more plans. We reached the mine entrance around 8 in the morning. The October air was cold and mist hung in the trees. Our drone expert set up her equipment on flat ground about 30 feet from the entrance. A laptop, controller, and the drone itself. The thing looked serious, with bright LED lights mounted on the front and protective guards around the propellers. She powered everything up, ran through her checks, and launched. The drone lifted smoothly, hovered for a moment, and then flew into the darkness of the mine entrance. We crowded around the laptop, watching the live feed. The inside of the mine was exactly what you'd expect. Rough stone walls, rotting support beams, debris on the floor. The main tunnel extended straight back into the hillside, disappearing into darkness beyond the drone's lights. Our drone expert flew slowly, carefully, calling out what she was seeing. The tunnel went back about 100 feet, then split. One branch continued straight, another curved to the left. She chose the left passage and guided the drone forward. That's when everything went wrong. The video feed flickered once, then the entire screen went black. Not static, just black. The controller showed 0 signal, no video, no telemetry, no connection at all. Complete signal loss. Our drone expert stared at her equipment in shock. She said this shouldn't be possible. The drone was maybe 200 feet away, and it was designed to work in tunnels. This kind of instant blackout shouldn't happen at that range. She tried reconnecting. Nothing. The drone had completely disappeared from her system. The rest of us stood there, not knowing what to say. One person suggested maybe the tunnel had collapsed and buried the drone, but we hadn't heard anything. Another suggested interference from the rock itself. Maybe the cinnabar was causing signal problems. Our drone expert shook her head. She'd flown in mines with all kinds of mineral deposits. This was different. She kept trying to reconnect for 20 minutes. Nothing worked. Finally, she said we had 2 options: give up on the drone or hike around to the other side of the ridge and see if we could pick up the signal from a different angle. We chose the second option. That drone represented $2,000 of equipment. We couldn't just abandon it. It took us almost 2 hours to hike around the ridge. The terrain was rough, covered in loose rocks and thick brush. We had to climb over several deadfalls and navigate around steep drop-offs. But eventually we made it to the opposite side, directly above where we estimated the mine tunnels would run underneath us. Our drone expert set up her equipment again and started scanning for the signal. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Just when we were about to give up, her laptop beeped. Connection restored. The video feed came back online and we all moved closer to see. The drone was sitting on the floor of a tunnel, its lights still on. Our drone expert carefully lifted it off the ground and started flying again, and that's when we saw something that made my stomach drop. The mine was huge, not just 1 or 2 passages, it was a network. The drone's camera showed tunnels branching off in multiple directions, including passages that ran west, away from the original mine entrance. None of this was on any of the historical maps we'd found. Either the original miners had dug much more extensively than anyone recorded, or something else had expanded this system. Our drone expert guided the equipment carefully, calling out each turn. Left tunnel, right branch, another split ahead. The place was like a maze underground. She chose the western passage, the one that shouldn't exist according to the maps, and flew the drone deeper. The tunnel continued for maybe another 100 feet, then opened into a wider chamber. Our drone expert slowed the drone down, adjusting the camera angle to capture as much as possible. That's when we saw the vegetation. Thick, green plants covered the floor of the chamber, not moss or the pale, sickly growth you sometimes see in caves. Real plants, ferns, grasses, even what looked like small bushes. All of it growing hundreds of feet underground in complete darkness. We stood there staring at the screen in silence. This was impossible. Plants need light to survive. There were no natural light sources this deep in the mine. Someone or something had brought this vegetation down here deliberately. The plants looked fresh, not dried out or dead. Whatever brought them here had done it recently. One person finally spoke up. They said it looked like bedding material, like something had gathered plants and brought them underground to make a nest or sleeping area. The arrangement wasn't random. The vegetation was concentrated in one area of the chamber, piled up like someone had deliberately placed it there. My hands were shaking. This was it. This was actual evidence of intelligent behavior. Whatever used this mine was smart enough to create a comfortable space for itself deep underground where nothing could find it. Our drone expert kept flying. The chamber had 2 exits, the tunnel we'd come through and another passage that branched off to the south. She chose the southern tunnel and guided the drone forward. This wasn't just an abandoned mine anymore. This was a network. A system of passages that something could use to move through miles of wilderness without ever being seen above ground. The implications were staggering. Whatever lived here was a master of staying hidden. The drone flew maybe 50 feet into the southern tunnel before the exact same thing happened. The feed flickered. The screen went black. 0 signal, complete blackout, just like before. Our drone expert tried to reconnect. Nothing. She checked her equipment. Everything on her end was working perfectly. The drone had just vanished from her system again. She looked at the rest of us and said she wasn't going to risk it anymore. Losing the signal once could be explained. Twice was a pattern. Something in those tunnels was interfering with the connection. And if it happened a 3rd time, we might lose the drone for good. We needed to abort. Nobody argued. We'd already seen enough to know this place was different. The vegetation, the unmapped tunnels, the repeated signal failures, all of it added up to something we couldn't explain. We hiked back around to the original entrance. It took another 2 hours, and by the time we got there, the afternoon sun was starting to drop behind the trees. Our drone expert packed up her equipment while the rest of us took photos of the mine entrance and the surrounding area. That's when one person called us over. They were crouched near the rough rock at the edge of the entrance, looking at something caught on the stone. Hair, thick strands of reddish-brown and whitish hair clinging to the jagged edges where something had brushed past. The strands were coarse, each one maybe 4 or 5 inches long. Not human hair, not bear fur either. I'd seen plenty of that over the years. This was different. We had a collection kit in one of our packs. We carefully pulled the hair free and sealed it in a plastic bag. None of us knew what animal it came from, but we all knew it was important. DNA analysis could give us definitive answers. We marked the exact location with our GPS and headed back toward camp. The sun was setting, and none of us wanted to be on that ridge after dark. Back at camp, we built a small fire and heated up our dinner. Nobody talked much. We were all processing what we'd seen, the vegetation underground, the unmapped tunnels, the hair samples. Individually, maybe each thing could be explained away. But together, it was adding up to something we couldn't ignore. After we ate, one person suggested checking the trail camera footage. We'd set up several cameras the day before, and they'd been recording continuously for over 24 hours. We pulled the memory card from the nearest camera and loaded it onto a laptop. Most of the footage was exactly what you'd expect: trees, shadows, the occasional bird. But around the 18-hour mark, something appeared that made the person watching freeze the playback. 2 figures moving along the trail about 50 yards from our camp. Large figures, dark, moving with purpose and coordination, one behind the other. We rewound and watched it again. The figures were bipedal, walking upright on 2 legs. The size didn't match any known wildlife in the area. Too big for a person, too tall for a bear on its hind legs. They moved deliberately, not with the cautious gait of animals passing through unfamiliar territory, but like they knew exactly where they were going. The footage was only about 12 seconds long before the figures moved out of frame. But it was enough. We watched it 5 more times, nobody saying anything. The timestamp showed this happened at 4 in the morning, right around the time I'd heard those footsteps circling our camp on the first night. One person pointed out how the figures moved together, coordinated like they were traveling as a pair. That suggested social behavior, communication, intelligence. We saved the footage to multiple devices. This was exactly what we'd come here to find. Visual evidence that something was in these woods, moving around our camp while we slept. The next morning, 3 of us decided to scout further out from camp while the other 2 stayed back to review more camera footage and organize our equipment. We headed northeast, following a ridge line that offered good visibility of the valley below. Around mid-morning, I spotted movement about 200 yards away through the trees. Something large with dark fur moving through the underbrush. I signaled to the others and got my camera out. At first I thought it was a bear. The Pacific Northwest has plenty of black bears, and this thing had thick, blackish-brown fur. It was moving on all 4s, pushing through the brush like bears do. I started recording, thinking at least I'd get some decent wildlife footage. Then the creature did something that made my breath catch. It stood up, smoothly, easily, rising onto 2 legs with perfect balance. And it didn't just stand there like bears sometimes do when they're sniffing the air. It walked, upright, on 2 legs, moving with confidence and coordination that no bear could match. It looked around once, then walked away into the denser forest with a fluid, human-like gait and vanished into the shadows. I kept recording until it disappeared, my hands shaking so badly the footage was probably useless. When I finally lowered the camera, I looked at the other 2. They'd both seen it. One person said the word we were all thinking. that wasn't a bear. We debated going after it, but the terrain where it vanished was too thick and steep. By the time we worked our way down there, it would be long gone. Instead, we marked the location and headed back to camp. We needed to show the others what we'd captured. Back at camp, we loaded the footage onto a laptop and watched it together. The quality wasn't great because of the distance and the shaking, but you could clearly see the creature stand and walk away on two legs. We played it frame by frame. The creature moved tall and upright with ease, not the awkward shuffle of a bear trying to walk bipedally. One person pointed out the head movement, vertical and deliberate, not the stiff motion typical of animals. The shoulders were broad, the arms long. When it walked, it moved like a person with a natural stride. We must have watched that footage 20 times, analyzing every detail. The more we looked at it, the more convinced we became that we'd captured something genuinely anomalous. This wasn't a bear. It wasn't a person in a costume stumbling around in the middle of nowhere. This was something else. Combined with the trail camera footage from the night before, the hair samples, and the evidence in the mine, we now had multiple pieces of evidence all pointing to the same conclusion. Something was living in this area. Something large, intelligent, and very good at staying hidden. That night, we sat around the fire and discussed what to do next. We'd originally planned to stay for 5 more days, but we'd already found more than we'd hoped for. The question was whether we should keep pushing or pack up and leave while we had solid evidence. 2 people wanted to stay. They argued that we were so close to potentially getting even better footage or finding more physical evidence. The mine network obviously served as shelter, and if we set up cameras near the entrance, we might capture whatever was using it. The other 2 wanted to leave. They said we'd already gotten what we came for, and pushing our luck might put us in danger. If there really was something in these woods, something territorial and intelligent, we might be making it nervous by setting up camp this close to its den. I was torn. The believer in me wanted to stay. After spending years searching, we'd finally found something real. Walking away felt wrong. But another part of me, the part that had felt watched ever since we'd arrived, said we should get out while we could. We decided to stay 2 more days. That would give us enough time to set up additional cameras near the mine, collect any other physical evidence we could find, and do 1 more aerial survey of the area using the drone. After that, we'd pack up and leave. Looking back now, I wish we'd left that night. The next morning, 4 of us hiked back to the mine, while 1 person stayed at camp to monitor equipment. We brought 4 more trail cameras, and our drone expert brought her equipment to attempt another flight. We positioned the cameras around the mine entrance, hiding them in the brush and angling them to capture anything approaching from different directions. We set them to motion-activated recording and made sure the batteries were fresh. They'd run continuously for at least a week. Then our drone expert set up her equipment again. She wanted to try 1 more flight, this time approaching from the opposite side where we'd reconnected before. Maybe if she flew in from that direction, she could avoid whatever was causing the signal blackouts. She launched the drone and guided it into what we estimated was the Western Passage, the unmapped tunnel we'd explored 2 days earlier. The feed came through clearly. We watched the drone navigate the passage, following the route we'd taken before. It reached the chamber with the vegetation. The plants were still there, still green and fresh looking. Our drone expert flew a slow circle around the chamber, getting footage from every angle. Then she guided the drone toward the southern tunnel. 50 feet in, the same thing happened. Flicker, blackout, 0 signal. This time she didn't even try to reconnect. She immediately shut down her equipment and started packing. She said whatever was causing the interference was consistent and specific to that southern passage. In all her years flying drones in caves and mines, she'd never encountered anything like it. The technology doesn't just fail for no reason, especially not in the exact same spot multiple times. One person asked if it could be intentional, like could something be actively blocking the signal? Our drone expert said she didn't know, she wasn't ready to speculate, but the look on her face said she was thinking the same thing we all were. We finished setting up the cameras and headed back to camp. The plan was to pack up the next morning, hike out, and come back in a week to retrieve the camera footage. I was in my tent, almost asleep, when I heard the first sound. It was around midnight, a long, low call echoing through the forest. Not a howl like a wolf or coyote. Deeper than that, it sounded almost like a roar, but with a strange resonance that made it carry through the trees in a way I'd never heard before. I lay there listening, my heart pounding. The forest had gone completely silent. No wind, no water sounds, just that deep, echoing call fading into nothing. Then I heard movement, something heavy pushing through the brush, heading toward our camp from the east, branches snapping under significant weight. The footsteps were deliberate and slow, like whatever it was wasn't trying to hide its approach. I heard someone unzip their tent, then another. We were all awake now, all hearing the same thing. I grabbed my flashlight and crawled out of my tent. The 5 of us stood in our camp, flashlights pointing into the darkness, listening. The footsteps had stopped about 100 feet out. We couldn't see anything beyond the reach of our lights, just dense forest and shadows. For maybe 5 minutes, nothing happened. Complete silence. Then the sound moved. It came from the south now, like whatever it was had circled around us. More branches snapping, more heavy footsteps. One person suggested we should go look. Another immediately said no, that was the worst idea possible. If something was circling our camp at midnight, going out there with flashlights would make us vulnerable. The sounds stopped again. We stood there in the cold October air, our breath visible in the flashlight beams, waiting. Then we heard it. A scream that started low and rose into something that made every one of us take a step backward. It wasn't an animal sound. It wasn't human either. It was something in between, something that made my skin crawl and my hands shake. The scream echoed off the ridges, faded, then went silent. After that, nothing. Just the normal sounds of the forest slowly returning, wind in the trees, water running over rocks. We stayed outside for another hour, keeping watch in shifts. Nothing else happened. Eventually, we went back to our tents, but I don't think any of us slept. At first light, we searched the perimeter of our camp. We found tracks, big ones. Each footprint was maybe 16 or 17 inches long, pressed deep into the soft ground near the creek. The prints were spaced about 4 feet apart, showing a massive stride length. The tracks came from the east, circled partway around our camp to the south, then headed back into the forest toward the ridge where the mine was located. Whatever made them had been watching us, studying us. And then it had returned to the mine. We took photos and measurements. The prints showed clear toe marks, 5 toes, just like a human foot, but much larger and wider. The depth suggested something incredibly heavy. One person estimated at least 600 or 700 pounds, maybe more. Nobody said it out loud, but we all understood what this meant. We'd set up camp within a mile of this thing's den. We'd sent a drone into its shelter, we'd placed cameras around its entrance, and now it had come to our camp to let us know it was aware of us. We held a quick meeting. The vote was unanimous this time. We were leaving immediately. We packed up our tents, loaded our gear, and started hiking back toward the trailhead. We moved fast, constantly checking behind us, feeling exposed on the trail. It took us 4 hours to hike out. We didn't stop to rest. We reached our vehicles, loaded everything, and drove away from that mountain as fast as the rough Forest Service road would allow. We met up a week later at someone's house to go through all our evidence. We had the drone footage showing the vegetation underground and the network of unmapped tunnels. We had the trail camera footage showing 2 large figures moving past our camp. We had my video of the creature that stood up and walked away on 2 legs. We had photos of the massive footprints near our camp. And we had the hair samples. We sent the hair to a lab that does wildlife DNA analysis. We didn't tell them what we thought it might be, just asked them to identify the species. The results came back 3 weeks later. The lab said the DNA didn't match any known animal in their database. They suggested it might be contaminated samples or possibly a hybrid of some kind. They couldn't give us a definitive species identification. We looked into sending it to other labs for additional testing, but the cost was beyond what any of us could afford. We'd already spent everything we had on the expedition itself. As for the trail cameras we'd left near the mine, we never went back to get them. None of us wanted to return to that place. We'd gotten our evidence, we'd seen what we came to see. But the experience had changed something in all of us. We decided to share some of our footage online. Not everything. We kept the best trail camera footage and the GPS coordinates of the location private. But we posted my video of the creature walking away on 2 legs, and we posted some of the drone footage from inside the mine showing the vegetation. The response was immediate and divided. Half the people said it was proof of Bigfoot. The other half said it was a hoax, that we'd somehow faked everything. Some suggested the creature in my video was just a bear. Others said the drone footage was staged. A few even claimed we'd put the plants underground ourselves. We expected that reaction. You can show people clear evidence and they'll still find ways to deny it. That's human nature. But we knew what we'd experienced. We knew what we'd seen and heard. It's been almost a year now since that expedition. I still think about it constantly. I think about those tunnels underground. That network of passages something uses to move unseen through miles of wilderness. I think about the vegetation carefully placed in that chamber hundreds of feet below the surface. I think about those 2 figures on our trail camera, moving with coordination and purpose. I think about the creature that stood up and walked away like a person. But mostly, I think about that night when something circled our camp. The sounds of those heavy footsteps, that scream that wasn't quite animal and wasn't quite human. The way the forest went completely silent, like every living thing was holding its breath. Whatever was out there knew we were there. It was aware of us the whole time. And when we got too close to its den, when we pushed too far into its territory, it came to our camp to let us know. Some of my friends ask me if I'll ever go back, if I'll try to find more evidence or get better footage. The answer is no, not to that place. We had our chance and we got what we came for. Going back would be disrespectful at best, dangerous at worst. But I do wonder about that southern tunnel, the one where our drone lost signal every single time. Our drone expert said the blackouts were consistent and specific to that one passage. What was down there that caused that kind of interference? What didn't want to be seen? I also wonder about the hair samples, the DNA that didn't match anything in the database. Labs deal with known animals all the time. Bears, deer, elk, mountain lions. When something comes back as unknown, what does that really mean? And I wonder about the footprints we found circling our camp, the stride length that suggested something tall and powerful, the toe marks that looked almost human but not quite. Those tracks led back to the mine, back to that underground network, back to a place we never fully explored. About 6 months after our expedition, I was researching survival training programs online. Just curiosity, really. And I stumbled across something strange. I found a forum post from someone who'd gone through military survival school decades ago. He mentioned that the topographic maps they used during training included illustrations of local wildlife: bears, elk, wolves, all the animals you'd expect to encounter. But he specifically mentioned that on some of the maps, particularly the ones for the Pacific Northwest and Canada, there was another illustration, a Sasquatch. Right there on official government training materials, alongside the bears and the wolves. He said nobody ever talked about it. The instructors never explained why it was there. It was just part of the map, like it was normal to include a cryptid next to documented wildlife. I tried to verify this. I searched for those old training maps online but couldn't find them. They're probably classified or archived somewhere inaccessible. But the fact that someone mentioned it, someone with no connection to cryptid research, just casually talking about his military training, stuck with me. What if the government knows? What if they've known for decades? These creatures live in remote wilderness areas, often on federal land. They use underground networks to stay hidden. They avoid human contact. If something like that exists, the government would absolutely know about it, and they'd have every reason to keep it quiet. I'm not much for conspiracy theories, but when I think about our expedition, the mine network, the evidence we found, the way that thing approached our camp like it knew exactly what it was doing, I can't help but wonder if we're not the first people to find proof. Maybe we're just the latest in a long line of people who've seen something real and been quietly dismissed. I started this story by saying I've believed in Bigfoot my whole life. That's still true, but belief and knowledge are different things. Before last October, I believed because of stories and blurry photos and footprint casts. I believed because I wanted it to be real. Now I know it's real because I've seen the evidence myself. I've watched drone footage of vegetation placed deliberately underground. I've seen trail camera footage of large bipedal figures moving through the forest. I've recorded video of something standing up and walking away on two legs with fluid, human-like movement. I've photographed massive footprints circling our camp. I've heard sounds in the night that no known animal makes. And I've felt what it's like to be watched by something intelligent, something that understood we'd come too close to its home and wanted us to leave. The 5 of us who went on that expedition still keep in touch. We share new information when we find it. We analyze old footage, looking for details we might have missed. But none of us talk about going back. What we found was enough. More than enough. Sometimes people ask me what it was like, seeing something that's supposed to be a myth. They expect me to say it was exciting or vindicating or proof that I've been right all along. And sure, maybe there's some of that. But mostly what I felt standing in that forest, listening to those footsteps circle our camp, was fear. Real, genuine fear. Because finding proof that Bigfoot exists means accepting that we share these mountains with something that's bigger than us, stronger than us, and has been hiding from us successfully for centuries. It means accepting that there are still places in this world where we're not the apex predator, where we're not in control. The wilderness is not as mapped and understood as we like to think. There are still gaps in our knowledge, still places that remain truly wild. And in those places, something lives that we've only begun to understand. The question that keeps me up at night isn't whether Bigfoot exists. I know it does. The question is, how many are there and how long have they been watching us? Think about it. We found that mine network by accident, and it had been there for over a century. The tunnels branched in multiple directions, covering what could be miles of underground passages. The vegetation inside was fresh, regularly maintained. That wasn't a temporary shelter, that was a home. How many other networks like that exist in the mountains? How many other hidden places where these creatures live just out of sight? The Pacific Northwest alone has thousands of square miles of remote wilderness. The Rockies, the Appalachians, the forests of Canada, all of it potential habitat. And if they're using underground networks to move around, that explains everything. Why we rarely see them, why footprints appear and then vanish, why sightings are so sporadic and hard to verify. They're not just hiding in the forest, they're hiding underneath it. The footage we captured on our trail camera showed two figures moving together. That suggests social behavior, family groups, maybe even communities. If they're working together, communicating, using complex strategies to stay hidden, then we're not dealing with a primitive creature. We're dealing with something that might be closer to human intelligence than we're comfortable admitting. And they've been doing this for generations, maybe thousands of years, living alongside human civilization while remaining almost completely hidden. That takes incredible intelligence and adaptability. So the question isn't just what's out there. The question is, what else don't we know about them? How do they communicate? What's their social structure? How many exist in North America alone? And the most unsettling question of all, how long have they been aware of us, watching us, while we remained oblivious to them? When people ask me about Bigfoot now, I don't try to convince them anymore. I just tell them what I experienced and let them draw their own conclusions. Most people still don't believe me. They think I misidentified a bear, or that our evidence is explainable through ordinary means. That's fine. I'm not trying to convert anyone. But sometimes someone will listen to my story and I'll see it in their eyes. That moment of uncertainty. That little crack in their certainty about what is and isn't possible. Those are the people I talk to. Those are the people who get it. I tell them to pay attention when they're in the wilderness, not just to what. For more interesting stories, check this out.